Johnny Murr here, and welcome to a brand new video. Today, or I guess yesterday, was finally the day we saw the Nintendo Switch 2 in full effect, in full reveal, all the details, all the questions, all the answers, all the exciting games, all the not exciting games. We saw everything, and somehow we are still kind of lost. And so we're going to go ahead, and I have done tons of research. I have done tons of digging around. I was going to make this video yesterday, but there was so much info and so many different things dropping, so many different outlets and sources reporting on all these different details, and some of it wasn't matching up. Some people were saying this, some people were saying that, and there was a ton of confusion, and there was a ton of questions and a ton of concern, a ton of excitement. Don't get me wrong. So I thought, you know what? Let me wait a day. Let me wait for all these details and all this thing to calm down. I'm going to do my research myself, and I'm going to figure out all this stuff, and I'm going to try and simplify all of this to the absolute best I can. So if you guys love video games, doesn't matter what you love, Nintendo, Xbox, PlayStation, and third-party PC, VR, indie, whatever it may be, consider subscribing. We are going to be covering a ton of things in the weeks coming, especially in terms of the Nintendo Switch 2, because there's just so much to talk about, and there's so much to be excited about. So thank you all so much for all the support, especially the support in this video right here. But without further ado, let's get talking about the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, this is actually going to be a two-part video. There is going to be this video, which we are going to be looking at all the different system information in terms of pricing, in terms of hardware details, in terms of release dates, in terms of backwards compatibility, in terms of upgrades between games. We're going to be looking at all that. And then the second part, we're going to be looking at console features as in the online connection, the chat stuff. We're going to be looking at the game sharing. We're going to be looking at the virtual game card, because that's a whole mess as well. And then we're going to be looking at the actual Direct itself, with some of the games announced. And then with the next week to come, I'm going to be covering a ton of games that were shown off during the Direct, breaking down a bunch of information about all those games. So like I said, there is a ton of content coming, so just stick with me. But let's get talking about the Nintendo Switch 2. And I mean, it's here. It's announced, and we have tons of details, including a date, including a price, and tons of specs. So let's go ahead and start breaking it down. Now, we're just going to jump off from the very basic information that you need to know about. Like I said, I'm going to try and simplify this as best as possible. Here's one thing I have to say, though. Nintendo has done a terrible job at communication, because this should not have happened, because Twitter and social media is an absolute chaotic place right now, with tons of info and details flying around like crazy. I listened to about 5 different podcasts this morning, and I think in every podcast I was hearing different things from different people. It is insane, just the amount of information detail that has been thrown at us all at once, and Nintendo did not do a good job at communicating. That was pretty much everybody else's job to try and figure it out. But let's get to it. The Nintendo Switch 2 will release on June 5th for $449, or you can get the Nintendo Switch 2 with the new Mario Kart game for $499, which is $500. So there you go. If you are looking for buying the Nintendo Switch, if you're looking for when can I play the Nintendo Switch, there it is. June 5th for $450, or $500 if you get it with Mario Kart. Now, where you get it, that's a whole nother topic. You know, you can go Walmart, you can go Best Buy, you can go Target, you can go GameStop, you can go Nintendo's site, you can go to so many different places. And you'll have to look at all those sites and look at all the stores for yourself to figure out where would work best for you or what you want to go with. The next thing we are going to talk about is the actual system specs. So what is the console? What kind of things is it going to be capable of doing? So the Nintendo Switch 2 has a 7.9-inch screen, which the original Switch, the Switch 1, had a 6.2-inch screen. So definitely a nice little improvement there. The screen will be able to support up to 120 frames per second. The screen has HDR support. And so let's just stop there. Let's just talk about the screen as a whole. Boom, right there. It's a bigger screen. They already said that in handheld form, it can actually go up to 1080p, which I think is a good resolution to be at for handheld. They also said that it can go up to 120 frames per second, which I think is actually kind of insane. I doubt we're actually going to be using 120 frames per second frequently, because that really just depends on the games, not the hardware. Like, if a game is developed for 120 frames, then yeah, you might be able to use it. But also there will be modes. For instance, Metroid Prime 4, you have 2 different modes. You can choose quality or performance mode, just like the Xbox and PlayStations. In one mode, you get higher frame rate, but lower resolution. In the other, you get higher resolution and lower frame rate. So that's just going to be up to you. The HDR support. So this is an LCD screen, not an OLED screen. I know some people are upset about that, but don't get twisted. We're going to get OLED at some point. That'll be like 2 years from now. They're going to release an upgraded version of the Switch with an OLED screen, and everyone's going to buy it because, let's just be honest, we're sickos. But it does have an LCD screen, and it does support HDR. I think this is definitely a win here, because if you're not going to have OLED, the next best thing to do is have the upgraded LCD screen with HDR to make those colors pop and shine a little bit brighter like the OLED does. It's just not going to be anywhere close to the OLED. There's this whole saying, once you go LED, you can't go back, and I completely agree. I just recently got an OLED TV, and it is so hard to now go and play on my monitor because it looks nowhere near as good. But nonetheless, that is what the screen is looking like. If you put it in the dock has 4K HDR support. So it's the same technology in terms of HDR, or whatever TV you have. So in my case, I do have LED, not LCD. But you are able to run the Switch on 4K as compared to 1080p on the handheld form. And I think this is awesome because the UI is going to look better, the menu is going to look better, the Nintendo Store is going to look better. Everything is just going to look better with that 4K support. And I think this is absolutely huge. The dock has its own cooling system. So for the Switch 1, the fans and the cooling system for the console itself were in like the handheld piece. And it causes some issues with overheating, with getting hot, or with slowing the load times. Whereas now, I'm sure you still have it within the handheld piece itself, because obviously if you're not playing in dock form, it needs some way to cool. But also, the dock itself will now have a fan to help with the cooling, and it will just help with everything performance-wise. And I think this is very, very good. The handheld piece itself does have a built-in microphone. It has a USB-C port on the top and bottom. Both can be used for charging, and the top one can be used for the camera. And I think that's really cool. The Joy-Cons, they have bigger buttons overall, bigger joysticks overall. The Joy-Cons themselves are just longer. And there is also the capability to use the Joy-Cons as a mouse. That's one of the big new features and one of the big new gimmicks that the Nintendo Switch 2 is offering, is that you can take those Joy-Cons and use it practically as a mouse. There are some games that are going to support that. There are some apps that are going to support that. One of them being Metroid Prime. If you do not want to use the joystick for aiming your gun, you can actually use the Joy-Con as a mouse for aiming the gun. And I think that's really, really cool, and I think that has major potential as long as the technology and the software actually works well. I could see it being that kind of Nintendo jank, like motion control, kind of sometimes it registers like correctly, sometimes it doesn't. But if it does work the way it should, this could be really huge, and this could be very, very exciting. Next thing we're going to talk about, how much storage does this thing have? And it has 256 gigabytes compared to what the last Switch had, which was 64. And I think this is huge. This is absolutely huge. It's just more storage overall. You're going to be able to fit a lot of games on here. You may have to get more storage at some point, but with 256, looking at the size of what most Nintendo games are, you're definitely going to be able to fit a lot of games on here without having to buy storage, but you probably will. Depending on how many games you choose to buy, you may have to extend the storage at some point, because with the higher visuals, with the bigger games, that it also is then going to increase the size of the game, so you kind of have to take all of that into consideration. But as far as that goes, that is the console right there. There is tons of testing and tons of getting hands-on and experiencing it for yourself that we're gonna have to take into consideration. But that is the hardware. There is a lot of reports coming out today that the console will actually support DLSS, I think is what it's called, and ray tracing. That has not been confirmed, so I'm not going to talk about that right now. I may have to do another video covering that, but like I said, I'm trying to keep this as simplified as possible, so don't even worry about that for the time being. But now we have to talk about backwards compatibility. The Switch 2 will be able to play most Switch 1 games. So they actually put out a list yesterday of all the games that currently you cannot play on the Switch 2. Just because currently you cannot play those games on the Switch 2 does not mean that will forever be the case. They are actively working on fixing some of the games or updating some of the games to be able to be compatible. That being said, the list of games that they put out is not that big of a list, and it is not a lot of major games. It's a lot of third-party stuff, and it's a lot of indie titles and a lot of really smaller games, to the point where I honestly, some of those I wouldn't really even say are relevant in a way. I think the biggest one is probably Doom Eternal, or Alan Wake Remastered maybe. So I wouldn't really worry about that. In my opinion, I would just say, to keep it really simple, you can play every Switch 1 game on the Switch 2, because at some point you will be able to, and at launch day, you're going to be able to play pretty much whatever you want, unless you are wanting to play that really one specific game. So for the most part, you can play all Switch 1 games on the Switch 2. Certain games, and we actually have a list of games here that I'm going to read through. Certain games will receive a free update for the Switch 2. And these are Switch 1 games that you will be able to just insert into your Switch 2, and they will have an update, and they will get some sort of improvement. We don't know the level or the size of these improvements, but it does say this, and this was announced by Nintendo. Free updates for select Nintendo Switch games. Free updates to improve playability on the Nintendo Switch 2 system will be released for select Nintendo Switch games. So, the games that will receive a free update are ARMS, Captain Toad, Super Mario Odyssey, Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, Clubhouse Games, Link's Awakening, Echoes of Wisdom, Game Builder Garage, Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, Pokemon Scarlet, Pokemon Violet, and Big Brain Academy. Now, we don't know the specifics of, are they fixing the frame rate issues in Echoes of Wisdom? Are they upping the resolution of the Pokemon games? Are they adding DLSS to some of these things? We don't know that. All we know is that these games will be updated for the Nintendo Switch 2. It's just the size or scope or scale of these updates we currently do not know about. But we have Nintendo Switch 2 editions of the game. So, and this is where it starts getting dicey, because now you start adding in multiple layers. It's like, okay, we have so many different things, so many different plot holes, and just things that we have to work around or try to understand on our head, and that's where it gets confusing. So, before we go into that, let's do a basic recap. You have Nintendo Switch 1 games. You can pretty much insert any Nintendo Switch 1 game and play it on the Switch 2. There are certain games that will receive a free update for the Switch 2. And now the third section of this is there are certain games that are receiving their own Nintendo Switch 2 edition, which in this case means huge visual overhauls, huge enhancements, new features, new content, new DLC, a ton of stuff. And so we're going to run through some of those games. In this case, we're going to be running through the big first-party Nintendo ones, and that is, first off, Zelda Breath of the Wild and Zelda Tears of the Kingdom are both receiving a Nintendo Switch 2 edition, which will improve the overall visuals of the game, as well as you will be able to use a little feature on your app on your phone called Zelda Notes, which is basically a guide for the game, which acts like a GPS or a tip giver. So very exciting stuff there. We do know that Kirby and the Forgotten Land is also getting a performance enhancement alongside a whole new DLC called Star-Crossed World, which will be more story, more levels, more content. Very, very exciting for that one. We do know Super Mario Party Jamboree is getting a Nintendo Switch 2 edition, which is adding a ton of new modes, a ton of new minigames, and it's actually adding games that you can use the mouse functionality, or you can add motion controls. They're adding in the improved rumble, We're getting all of that stuff, and I think that's very, very exciting for that game. I think that game is actually shaping up to be a really, really fun one to have for the Nintendo Switch 2. And then we have some new games that haven't even released yet that are getting a Nintendo Switch 2 edition. And those games being Metroid Prime 4 and Pokemon Legends Z through A. So what I mean by this is these are cross-gen titles, meaning you do not technically need a Switch 2 to play these two titles. But if you have a Switch 2, you can buy the Nintendo Switch 2 edition of them, and they will be overall better products. So for instance, Metroid Prime 4 will release on the Switch 1 and the Switch 2. If you buy it on the Switch 2, you get that edition of the game, which will have improved visuals, improved performance. You will have the choice between quality mode and performance mode, which means you can actually play the game in 4K 60 frames per second, which is phenomenal. You can also use the mouse functionality on the Joy-Cons to play the game in terms of shooting, in terms of aiming. I think that is really, really cool. As well as Pokemon Legends Z through A is getting one of the best visual overhauls I have seen out of all these, because, ladies and gentlemen, it actually made the game look visually pleasing. Like, I'm not going to say it looks amazing, but it looks so much better on the Switch 2 than it does the Switch 1, and I think that is such a big W. And so that is currently all the Nintendo Switch 2 edition games that we currently know about. I'm sure that this will be a thing that carries on for a while. Like, every time we see a Nintendo Direct, we're probably going to get one or two Nintendo Switch 2 edition of the games. And I think that's really exciting, because in a way, this acts as like a deluxe or a remaster in a way, but it's not, you have to pay $60 every single time that happens. So I think this is a really, really fun thing to do. Now we're going to get to another thing, and this is where it got really confusing. The pricing of everything. The pricing of everything. So the first thing we're going to go over is the accessories. So they announced a bunch of accessories that you are able to buy alongside the Nintendo Switch 2, as well as the prices. So we're going to go over all of that. The first one being the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro Controller. They revamped and remodeled the Pro Controller for the Switch 2, which is pretty much the same thing, but it does have a little bit of upgrades and changes, including the C button and the grips on the back of the controller. The Nintendo Switch 2 Pro Controller will release for $79.99. The Nintendo Switch 2 Joy-Con 2s are releasing for $89.99. A Nintendo Switch 2 Joy-Con 2 charging grip for $34.99. The Joy-Con straps for $12.99. Nintendo Switch 2 Joy-Con wheels for $19.99. These things are for Mario Kart. The Nintendo Switch 2 camera for $49.99. And you can get an extra dock for $99.99 as well. So there you have it. There are all the accessories. And if you are confused about what is compatible from your original Switch, can you use things from your first Switch that you bought so many different Joy-Cons, so many different Pro Controllers? And the answer pretty much is yes. Joy-Cons you can use on your Nintendo Switch 2. Nintendo Switch 1 Pro Controllers you can use on your Switch 2. You can use your NES controllers, your SNES controllers, your N64 controller, and your Sega Genesis controller. The things you cannot use, the things that you will not be able to use on your Switch 2 from your Switch 1 are the adjustable charging stand for the handheld piece, the original Nintendo Switch dock, the power cord from the original, the HDMI that came with the original, micro SD cards. There is now new storage, Nintendo GameCube controller adapter, and the original Joy-Con straps. So, a lot of things there, right? Now we get to prices of games. And this is really, the whole story of this whole event and this whole thing is the prices is what made everybody go into a frantic frenzy. Because, truth be told, and this isn't really going to be a video where I give my opinion on things. That's going to be either a podcast or I'm going to do a whole nother separate video. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that plenty of times. But the prices are high. The prices are high for a lot of things. And this is definitely a problem that has struck for a lot of people. And I think it's an overarching conversation to be had. And I think there's a lot of implications for this. But let's go ahead and break down what I'm exactly talking about. The biggest one to talk about here is the brand new Mario Kart World. It will release alongside the Nintendo Switch 2 on June 5th, and it is priced at $79.99, meaning this game is an $80 game. So for those of you who don't know, who just say, oh, yep, that's a high price, the highest priced Nintendo game Nintendo has ever done was $70, and that was for only one game called Tears of the Kingdom. And $70 was Nintendo going to the level that Xbox and PlayStation were already at, right? If you have an Xbox or PlayStation, $70 is normal for you, right? Whereas in this case, Nintendo going to $70 was literally once in a generation. Whereas now we reach the Switch 2, not only are some games going to $70 on a more frequent basis, but they have once again upped it again. They basically completely skipped a step. They were like, why would we raise the price once if we could raise the price 2 times? So here we are. Mario Kart World is the very first $80 game to ever exist when we're talking about a base game. We're not talking about deluxe editions. We're not talking about premium editions. We're talking about a base game. If you want the standard edition of the game, it is $80. Now, there was a lot of confusion about, will the physical be more expensive than the digital? And for a lot of people, we did think that. There has not been any clarification on this. We have not seen anything. But what I will say is the physical versions for Mario Kart World are listed at $80. Now, we don't know if that's just for Mario Kart World or if that's for all the games. But as of Mario Kart World talking, there is no price increase for physical editions. It is priced at $80 flat. So, what about the other games? Well, Donkey Kong Bonanza, which is the big 3D Donkey Kong game that they announced, is a $70 game. And just so you know, both of these games are Nintendo Switch 2 exclusives. You cannot get these games on the Switch 1. This is where it gets a little more controversial and questionable for me. And that is these Nintendo Switch 2 edition games, right? We talked about how the Zelda games are getting Nintendo Switch 2 editions. We talked about how Kirby is getting a Switch 2 edition. Kirby and the Forgotten Land Switch 2 edition is $80 as well. This is a game that came out in 2022 and is getting an upgrade for the Switch 2, and they are charging $80. So if you had the game at some point and traded it in, or if you currently have the game, if you currently have the game, you can upgrade it. We don't know what the cost of the upgrades are going to be. If you don't have the game anymore, or you just never had the game, you basically have to spend $80 to play it on the Switch 2 if you want the upgraded version and you want the new DLC. Otherwise, you can still play just the Switch 1 version on the Switch 2. The Zelda games, Tears of the Kingdom is priced at $80 as well, and Breath of the Wild is $70. Super Mario Party Jamboree is also $80. So, pretty much, Nintendo has priced all their games super duper high, which I can't really say we're surprised about because it's Nintendo. That's what they do. But I think what is even worse is this. Nintendo Switch Online plus expansion pack members playing on the Nintendo Switch 2 will soon gain access to upgrade packs for both Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, allowing them to enjoy the Nintendo Switch 2 editions of these games at no additional cost. So there you go. If you have Nintendo Online plus expansion pack and you have Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, you can actually get those Switch 2 edition upgrades for free. But here's where we got confused yesterday. News broke out about this, and we just assumed every Nintendo Switch 2 edition would be in the Online Plus expansion pack. Whereas that is not the case. It is only the 2 Zelda games. So if you want to upgrade Metroid, if you want to upgrade Kirby, if you want to upgrade Pokemon or Mario Party, you have to purchase the upgrade, which, again, we do not currently know the price of those upgrades. So, if all of this sounds great to you, if all of this sounds super on board, which, don't get me wrong, again, this is not a video where I'm telling you about my opinion, but I will go ahead and say this. I am super duper excited. The prices suck. It's really unfortunate that the prices are these high, but honestly, I'm not surprised at them, knowing where the industry's headed. I'm still super duper excited for this. There's so many games I'm looking forward to, and I think the console itself, like hardware-wise, is dang near exactly what we wanted. Actually, more than what we wanted, and I'm super duper excited about that. If you guys have any questions, I try to be as simple and as specific and as clear as possible. If you guys have any questions, please let me know in the comment section, and I will do my best to answer those. But we do have a part 2 of this video where we're going to be talking about some of the features like the online capabilities, like the whole game card thing versus the game keys. We're going to be looking at the cover arts. We're going to be looking at just some more specific things about the console itself. But thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Johnny Moore out. Peace.